Well, this is a bit of a transition point for me now. I've been at the coal face working in healthcare, big agencies for decades. And finally, I decided in January to step out of that, do a startup, but also a consultancy. I'm looking for a bit more balance in my life, a bit more doing the things I want to do. And that means working in innovation, and exploring. It feels like a really momentous time with AI. And actually, my dream when I went to uni, this is like almost 30 years ago, was to do NLP. And I studied linguistics. And at the time, the field was in its infancy. Nothing was very interesting. And then Siri came along a bit later. And I thought, now's the moment. But no, I found that it really didn't deliver. It still felt clunky. And it was, it just wasn't interesting. So I stayed away until GPT came along, the era of GPT, then conversational AI. Finally, I feel like I have my moment. So I'm going for it.
Wonderful. I really am excited about your talk. And even just the fact that you've made this transition period, like there's a lot of great work you can do when you're in a more corporate position, but when you're able to work for yourself, possibilities are almost endless. That's not me saying that you should all leave your corporate jobs. If you want to, that's your choice. But there's pros and cons to everything. But the most important thing is you do what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
You utilize the skills that you care about and enjoy, and you feel like you're making a difference in the world in some shape or form. So your talk then, Rethink immersive experiences with conversational AI. This is basically building from what you've just said you're doing. So yeah, I'm excited to hear. Give a warm applause to welcome her. Thank you.
I've known Giles a good while, and you've been quite good at finding balance in your life, I think.
Yeah, I try. I try.
You've had moments where you've been doing the corporate thing. I know you work at BI, etc. But yeah, I've always looked to you to think, Giles is an example of someone who just felt the passion. He was a doctor. He knew that wasn't right and just went for it. So inspiration.
One more thing. Is your microphone on?
There we go. Yes, there we go. I want to start my talk with this image. This image is my mother. My mother is my partner in design for the product that in my new consultancy we've got, our little startup. This image inspired me. It was an idea of my father had recently been in a care home, and in his last days, he was only there a year. He did very well. He died at 91. But in his last days, his life got smaller and smaller. He was just lying in a bed, essentially. And I thought, what's one place, or what would be a great place for the prototype that you would miss the most? And it seemed to me there was an intuitive human thing about being by the sea. And you often see images of old people, particularly looking out over a scene. And I've been doing this with Jay. And you see like dogs playing, kids, there's a whole drama that goes on. And it seemed to me that if you're lying in a bed, you can't go anywhere. This would be a moment it would just feel like you could get out of that bed in a meaningful and important way. So that was my first kind of inspiration to create this project and this product. I had already fallen in love with virtual reality over COVID. I was one of those people who bought the headset over COVID and thought, oh, I can't go out and see people. Maybe I can virtually. But I was also one of those people who put it aside after, I don't know, a year and a half or so, thinking, well, the gaming's good. Wow, it's pretty cool. But I don't know. I'm a gamer. I'd rather just play on the console or the PC, It wasn't until I experienced social VR that it really got sticky for me. And a year and a half later, from when I really started that, when I found social VR, I'm now part of a community in VR. I thought I'd better do a bit of an ethnographic study, really understand what happens, what's the potential here. And I'm going to show you some examples. But I think that sort of confluence of conversational AI with the idea of being able to be in places with other people really inspired our thinking for the product. I've told you a little bit about myself already, but I also wanted to mention my interest in NLP and data. Interestingly, I've been in UX a long time. I was head of UX at agencies before I kind of moved into strategy. And I remember thinking, in early days, it was the moment when we stood up as designers and said, qualitative research is the way. You've been designing stuff based on segmentation, quantitative data. That's not enough. We need to really get under the skin of people's mental models, really understand motivations to technology. The things that Giles was talking about yesterday, and we heard about around community psychology, around what are the things in the person's brain that make a difference to how they experience the world, and how do these have an impact on technology. And so I felt, this was important. And for a long time, that's where I put all my attention. But I guess about just before I went and worked on the analytics team, I fell in love with the idea of being able to understand these signals in people's behaviors through data. And so I went and worked on an analytics team. I got introduced to data science there. I started Python Club. It was kind of a bit like a sabbatical before I moved back. In a sense, it was stepping back into my life as a product strategy, experience design leader at Publicis. And I've put the last thing there because, interestingly, when you do start opening up new doors, Unreal Engine, this is a completely new thing for me. Like, there's a gaming community here in London. So we've been going to the meetups and joining the community and getting to know everyone. And it's wonderful to learn a new skill. I was a graphic designer at the beginning of my career, but learning 3D has been really, I felt it wasn't for me, but then I tried it and was like, actually, there's nothing like designing a space and then going in it in VR. You feel like you've created a dollhouse. It's really quite amazing. So what I want to talk about today is this idea of humanizing the machine. And I see the machine as the new interface. So we've been designing screens, we've been designing virtually screens, I suppose, products on apps, etc. But this now we have to think about an actual humanoid, I guess, could be anything, type of person, but who will have human-like traits. It has a personality, it has a voice style, it has a brain, in a sense, to an extent, like ours. So we're going to talk about how you might approach designing this interface today, and the complexity of it is not trivial. We're going to talk about figuring out where and how AI can help. We heard quite a bit about AI yesterday. I'm going to open the bonnet and show you a little bit around the work I've been doing on something called AutoGen, which is a multi-agent architecture, which will be powering the brain. We're going to explore some advances in how we're working to reduce the risks that we heard about. We heard the word hallucinations a couple of times yesterday, and I'm going to tell you what we're doing to mitigate those problems. So starting out with this idea of trends, it's been really interesting to see, AI, it's huge. I can't think of another trend that has been so impactful in everybody's mindset, Amara tells us that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term. So everyone's thinking AI is going to change everything. However, in the long term, we tend to underestimate that impact. And I think that's very helpful. I was looking at this though and thinking, okay, there we are with AI. I was thinking, actually, it feels like it's way up there. But then if you contrast XR, immersive tech, spatial computing, whatever you might call it, it's been a long road. It's tried to happen many times. And I talked to veterans in the field and they're like long suffering, like, I still love it, but is it going to happen this time? Is it going to happen this time? We're not really sure, and I think something very important did happen last year that may change that this time. So Mark Zuckerberg wasn't able to really get that hockey stick curve that we heard about yesterday happening, but maybe Apple can, everybody thinks. And I think it's quite interesting that despite issues around, Tim Cook didn't even wear the headset until, this is from February this year, there's huge perceptions around, I don't want to wear that on my face. And that kind of mindset stuff has held it back. It just feels like the wrong thing that we should be doing now. We're supposed to be out, as you might say, touching grass, being with other people, valuing, you know, these kind of face-to-face interactions. We really don't want to. It's this, you know, I saw in a journalist post, go skiing in the Matrix. Is that really what we want to do? You know? And so I think the idea of a moonshot is quite interesting, because the idea is, where are we going to get there? It's a big, grand idea. Could it change everything? Maybe it'll change everything. I think it will change quite a lot of things, and specifically for people who are not able to experience the face-to-face in real life things that us able-bodied or people who have social anxiety experience. I feel that immersive experiences have the opportunity, you know, there's a huge trans community in there. I've met so many people who have found themselves and then have embarked on a transition journey. And it's because in a space like that, you are a different avatar, you're not yourself. If you feel you want to try out being another gender, you just put on the avatar, you change your voice, it's quite simple. And so, you know, and you're anonymous as well. So it's a kind of a place for exploration. It's a place for just being who you feel you are inside, but you cannot be in the outside world. So I see huge potential there. I do want to talk about the ethics though, and this is a thinker that I follow. She did a wonderful webinar at the Hastings Center last year, and it was on, should AI care for us? And she thinks about the political economy as well. She's that's just a tiny list of what she actually looks after. But she's at the University of Edinburgh, but she is a real thinker in the confluence of data, AI, and moral values, the techno-moral futures, if you will. And so what she says is there are places where machines can supplement caregiving and allow it to be, in fact, as rich and as safe and equitable in its provision. There's a place for robots in that picture, I believe. But her biggest worry is that there's also not the economic incentive for something that has this light touch role. And I will keep coming back to that idea of a light touch role in caregiving. The economic incentive is to push the machine to replace a human. And I believe we in this room have a responsibility, and we've started talking about responsible AI, to say it's not the place to replace a physician, clearly, but it's not a place to replace a nurse either, you know, and so on. It is the place for AI to be used to supplement and to help these people, I think. And so when we're designing things, I think we should make sure that, you know, there's going to be huge economic pressure on us to replace roles. But I think we need to stand up and say, this is what's appropriate, because caring to Professor Valor is something that's human and essential and needs to be driven by a person now, at least. So anyway, I'm going to talk about 5 tips to get you on your journey with immersive experiences and conversational AI. I'm going to touch on the research toolbox. This is an easy one because we're all researchers, so we're not going to talk about that too much. And then some of the new tools that I've found useful when thinking about concepting around immersive experience design. I'll talk about the characters a little bit. I'm going to show you some examples of others out there. And then this notion of capable agents. This is not just about talking, not just about chatting and ChatGPT. It's about getting agents to do things, being able to execute things, being autonomous agents, and then just touching a bit on the regulatory issues and ethics along the way. So I'm going to frame the discussion based on the problem so you can see concretely how we've kind of worked our way through these issues with the idea of the project, our product. And the problem that we saw is that older people are at risk of being left behind. By 2026, 2 million older people in the UK will feel persistently lonely. And there was an excellent presentation by Maria's yesterday about, yes, about your data shows that independence is very important, and loneliness is absolutely part of that, I think, isn't it? And my mother, who is my partner in design, she was very inspired by the Blue Zone. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix. This is about, she said, at the end of the day, it's about engagement. This is what keeps people alive, keeps people's brains engaged. So how do we do that? Given that as we get older, our lives get smaller and we get less able. So isolation also causes poorer health. You can see the data shows that it's as bad as being obese, as bad as smoking, and it gives you, as I've just mentioned, a greater risk of dementia. And they often have multiple issues: chronic pain, dementia, mobility problems. And critically, this is the thing, inability to use technology. There is a spectrum, and many of your personas were, I'm sure, very able for using screens, etc. But there's a lot of those older people who increasingly lose the ability to actually use those, to understand navigation systems. It's something that I noticed. If we had voice, they never forget how to use voice. So if they can just talk, like my father couldn't use the TV remote. He was great with technology, but at the end, he could say, "Can you put on car racing for me?" to me, but he couldn't use the TV remote anymore. So the idea of being able to use, to bypass all the buttons, all the screens, and especially because they change, we change them, we upgrade them, we design the plane while it's flying, and that just leaves them all behind. So the idea of voice came in there. I'm just going to show you here some little visuals, again, thinking, as creative people do, in many buckets at once, like, what might this look like? So this is our prototype, the initial sort of thinking that we had. And our initial project hypotheses were that the AI could encourage the user into a conversation in a believably human-like way. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. Can the AI actually be a friend? Can it be a companion? The jury's a little bit out for me on that. But can it have utility? Yes, I believe absolutely. In our testing, and you're going to hear a little bit about that, they were interested in all sorts of things. As your memory starts to become unstable, you're like, how many wives did Henry VIII have again? My mom used to love like listing out the names of them, but as you get older, they kind of slip away. And so just having the ability, like one of the guys is a Scottish guy, and he like Scots Gaelic poems. He just was like, I could talk to her all day. So just being able to have moments where you're just getting the AI to retrieve stuff that then you go, oh yeah, I think that has utility. We talked a little bit about memoirs. That was something that came up in testing. I think it's a bit niche because it didn't come up very much. But being able to talk to the AI to record your memories for your family. That's another thing that gives meaning to that experience of talking to a robot. So this is what I'm still in search of. What are these use cases that really make it feel valuable talking to a robot, someone that is not a human? And I'll come back to that idea a bit later. The next point here I have is the AI could help the user find experiences that they couldn't normally access. So for example, one of the things that they told us is they quite like the idea of re-experiencing vacations they'd been on with their friends. And so being able to go and live and see the place again was something that they found valuable, particularly if the people who'd been on the holiday with them were there as well. And the last one was about the AI helping friends and family stay connected to the person through visits. So this could be a virtual visit, but it could also be in terms of sending messages. So we could have the AI, can your daughter said I don't know, it's your aunt's birthday. Do you want to send a message to her or something? Just allowing the person to use voice to do things like emails, etc. So I'm going to go on now to just, if you look at immersive tech, what is there and what's really happening that's kind of interesting. The metaverse as a term might have died, but this hasn't reduced the investments in immersive tech. We have huge things going on with the youngers in things, game-like experience like Fortnite, and fashion's getting involved in there, and Roblox. The next generation of children are already living in the metaverse, and particularly in VR, when you go in there to start out with, it's full of children. And that in itself should tell us something. We've got to be ready for this. Augmented reality is particularly interesting, I think, because Apple is claiming this space. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And it made us think, well, our AI doesn't have to be in VR just. As the glasses get, lighter, it could just be like a butler in your home. You described Siri as the villain, and I thought that was interesting. This voice, what is this voice? But if it's a person in your home that you get used to, I think despite cognitive decline, you'll still be able to interact. I think that's very interesting. And then the last is virtual reality. So yeah, Horizon Worlds is, I don't know anyone who uses Horizon Worlds, but I do have an example of older people using it that I'll show you, which I think is kind of interesting. So if you think about VR, what is it really good at? I mean, the first thing is this idea of actually feeling like you're in a different place. That is significant. And when you're with others, particularly, you are somewhere. That means when you navigate, you're navigating over to somewhere just by, I want to move over there. It's not like a controller, buttons and all that. You just you can go over there. You do have to use a button, but it's very simple. It's like, I want to go there. And in time, we'll have something that will allow us to move with our feet. I think being in a bed, it's quite easy to just press that button going forward. That doesn't concern us that much. New experiences, some of the exciting things are that you can fly in VR, you can go to interesting places and see whales. You might be in like a penthouse hangout with your mates, and then a whale just kind of drifts by, or you're looking out over the Hong Kong harbor, and it's not enough in itself. I wouldn't do that on my own, probably more than once or twice, but you're there with mates, it's fun. It really is cool. I think the important thing, as I said before, anyone who spends time in VR knows that co-presence, being with other people, is really the killer app for VR. But there are huge barriers. The accessibility is terrible at the moment. It takes ages to get in. There's a lot of crashing. It's just misery. Standalone headsets are way behind PC VR. So if you get used to PC VR, the quality is so much better. It's difficult to just go back to the headsets. And they're too heavy. They're awkward. They just don't feel good. It's all just too much. But I think Apple really is the one that will help us with this. It's not like their headset is much lighter, but I do think importantly for us is that they have really taken this as an experience principle to navigate simply by using your eyes, hands, and voice. And so that means for our older people that they will not lose the ability to do these things, because this will carry them through till essentially, the end. And now with conversational AI, being able to use natural language with your voice is really going to change everything, as we've discussed. But I must say that the experiential nature of being able to, I'll use a gaming example, like pull a bow from your backpack, and then to do this is wonderful. It just, the immersion, you talk about the immersion, it's like what we've been wanting for ages as UX designers, somehow, not to have all this other stuff in the way, but to just be able to use our bodies and our voice. That's why I'm calling it the most complex new interface that we've ever had to design. In some ways it's simple because we know exactly what we need to do, but on the other hand, it's complicated to integrate it. So how do we start? We rely on our research toolbox that we've already, got, all of us in this room. We talked about secondary research, and in the space of, really interesting here on AI, all the papers I'm looking at are from 2023, all of them. It is moving so fast. They are preprint journal papers. It's incredible on one hand. But then on the other hand, researchers have been using VR, researching it for years, like decades even. Huge literature on the use of VR therapeutics. They've even started using entertainment in care homes. So you might have swimming with dolphins, experiences like that. But few have been commercialized. Accessibility remains a big barrier. But in this case, the secondary research is on our side. And then identifying analogous examples. This one is for seniors. This is an American thing in Horizon Worlds. Thrive Pavilion, it's called. So when we were thinking about our product, we thought, what's out there already? What's being used? I don't know if you guys looked at this. Well, Horizon Worlds, yeah, this Thrive Pavilion, it's really interesting. They have a book club, they have games and things like that. And my heart always goes to statements like this. Even if I can't walk in real life, I can walk here. You know, I attend a yoga session with a guy who's blind, and it's amazing to me that even he wears the headset. You think, what is he getting out of the headset? But the audio cues allow him to build a spatial representation of the room, and then he can go up to different groups of people. So it works very well. And he's teaching this every day. You know, it's just brilliant, I think. And then, of course, it connects people. So that shake of hands is a handshake across the Atlantic. And some of my friends, one lives in a tiny island off of Finland. I didn't even know those islands existed. But you can see, and someone's in northern rural England, it's just, and they're youngsters. They want to go out, they want to see people. And so geography is important as well for this, I think. Now I'm going to show you kind of what may be to come. This is a virtual reality experience of Dubrovnik, which is using photogrammetry. So it's scanning. When you're in it, it looks quite good at this view, but when you're in it, if you go close, you can see artifacts. It's weird a little bit. And that I find gives me a bit of an emotional reaction of, it's real, but it's not. I think it's more of a hint of what's to come. Although I was speaking to somebody who put their 94-year-old gran in and took her to the Vatican. She's an Irish devout Catholic, and she loved it. So I don't know if that experience was better, but the thing that I found amazing is that I did this, and then I was watching a TV show, and there was an advert, and I recognized the church, and I thought, I've surely seen photos of Dubrovnik many times before, but it hadn't embedded as a memory, as a real memory of somewhere I'd been. So for me, that was a really important moment of the potential of this technology. Let's go on. That's my next one. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about testing because we have heard loads about that yesterday and we all know it. But this is just an example of the study that we did at the end of last year. We had 15 participants, and then we had a spectrum of capabilities, if you will, and attitudes to technology. And everyone had put their hand up to take part in a study with virtual reality. So it was biased, our results, and to the extent that they were already interested. They had never tried it. None of them had tried it, but they were interested. So even though the results were quite positive, they thought this is interesting. I'm very conscious of the fact that there's lots of people who are like, no, I'm not interested at all in putting that thing on my face. But it was enough for me to think that there was real potential there. I wanted to mention, I think there's some thinking around the difference between 2D design, if you will, and what's different about game design. None of us have time to become experts in game design user experience, but I think Nielsen, when he was talking at this conference, he noted this point, and I think this is important. All traditional external user interfaces have some external goal, and that it speaks to the transactional nature of a lot of the thinking that we do. We're like task analysis, like what does the user want to do? It's all directed towards achieving some sort of goal, if you will. But for video games, it's the satisfaction that's all important. And I thought this was really interesting. I've never really liked the word satisfaction. It seems like the bar is very low, but there's such power, isn't there, in delighting in, and building experiences that really build connections, So I set out to find out who we should be looking at. And I think this woman, Celia Hodent, comes from the same stable that we do, in the sense she's got rigor, she's got lots of stuff in her toolbox, lots of familiar stuff in her toolbox. A lot of games user experience people just rely on play testing. So it's like you bring people into a studio, put them in cubicles, and they just play, and then answer surveys. and they do that iteratively, and it works, obviously, but she has more of a user experience approach that I think we can connect in with. And I want to draw attention to the engageability. We mentioned at the beginning how engagement is really important. And specifically, if you're trying to, like, how do I build engagement with a robot? And I think some of these points here are important, like the motivation. What's that utility? What's the value of that interaction? Competence, autonomy, being able to, therapeutics, for example, came up in the testing. So how are they able to do that, do an autonomous, am I choosing my selections, related, meaningful, good goals and rewards, that gamification, if you will be very important here for the therapeutics particularly. Emotion is going to be huge because of the way the voice conveys emotion, and you'll see some examples. Feel, what does it feel like in this world? I wanted to make it quite realistic because I felt that that would be the easiest way in for these older people, something that looked familiar. And the difficulty curve, pacing and learning curve are important as well. So some of the tools that you can use, you'll see on the left there, it's like what's wireframes in the 3D space. I had a go at drawing, but I was not able to do this. But there are these templates that exist out there. And if you are able to, this is how you might sketch in VR. So have a go with that if that makes sense to you. I found it easier to just put the blocks where I wanted them. So this is essentially a 3D wireframe. This is where you're starting to plan how the things will be laid out in this space. And I'm going to show you now, this is in the game engine. This is Unreal Engine. And so you can see, I'll just go back so you can see that you start blocking it out and then it becomes a 3D model with the materials that go on to make the stone look like stone. Each of these is a mesh, they're called. Now I'm going to show you the prototype, just a bit of it. It's a video of it. I'm going to introduce it though by saying that you're dropped in to a place overlooking the sea. I learned in my research with dementia patients that they don't like things to come from behind. So the AI actually walks up the steps and you have time. We use a butterfly to grab your attention. And then the AI walks up the steps and you have time to oh, wow, somebody's coming, okay. And then she introduces herself and she sits down on the bench next to you. So let's hear how this goes. It's just me talking and I'm just freewheeling it, there's no script, and just see what happened. Okay, there we go. So the good first, as you can see there, we were able to get much further than we expected to, in the sense that the conversation is quite natural. She was able to cope with almost anything. I went to a UX conference and UXers were saying, so our AI is going to take over the world, and what's the future of user experience? And she was amazing at answering things like this. Everyone was really quite stunned at her capabilities there. So we knew that the conversation, there was something exciting there. Also, who she was, how she showed up. We just used a Ready Player Me, free off the shelf sort of thing, character, and that tested very well. Nobody said, "Oh, I hate her." You know, they thought, "No, she's pretty good." One guy said maybe if she had green eyes, it would be nice. So we, you know, the, they said thought she was pleasant. The voice tested well. So conversation, the setting tested very well as well. I was quite pleased about that. Although that's just the starting point. You know, in a 3D space, you'll have the opportunity to select where you want to go. But there were a lot of challenging aspects too. She would just answer a question and then she'd go, "What else would you like to know?" And it became, you'd run out of steam. The people would be like, "I don't know what else to ask," you know, or they'd just go, how does communication get from the earth to the moon? A lot of them asked questions that were kind of on their mind, clearly that we would probably Google, but they just thought, oh, okay, let's see if she knows. And it was pretty impressive. But you know, it's a one-shot experience. She doesn't remember anything, and so she does along the way to an extent, as she is out of the box here. But we needed to build an experience over time. So we knew that we were going to need a lot more complexity. And in a sense, we were going to need to build a brain for her, a proactive brain where she had goals. She was going to be trying to get them to try activities. She was going to have to know when they didn't like activities. You went in, that you only spent 5 minutes in there last week, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So what were the things that really came up? I was surprised. I didn't think that they'd really want the therapeutic experiences. For the brain, that came up very well. And the reason why is that they all have a sense of memory issues, I think. And maybe I can stay on my game if I do more of this. Diary management also came up very, very strongly, which is something you guys are working on. Absolutely. And keeping track on what you're doing this week so that they could go in, I'm just thinking of my father towards the end. That was almost our whole conversation, is like going over and over what's happening this week. And like, oh yeah, and so I've got the doctor then, and then, and we're going to go out on the shopping. Yeah. So there's a lot of fodder there, and I understand absolutely why they had the calendars you were talking about. And let me just see, I can't read that. Yeah, okay, so therapeutic experiences for the body. So that would be, stretching, yogi things. Some of them were wearing Fitbitty kind of things. I think the people that were in the Fitbits, though, did not see the utility of this. It's more the people who are on the verge. Particularly, there was someone whose brother had Parkinson's, and he was starting to worry that he might have memory issues. And so you could just gauge the interest. There was a lot more interest in what this could do for him, whereas others kind of felt like, oh, I'm not there yet. When I get there, for other people, these kind of things we often hear in research. Current events and news, they seemed very grounded in what's going on now. So I think we could get very far with just having, in the UK, it would be BBC News, just having a couple of news sources there, looking up historic facts and answering your questions. I think they'll find value in that. And then exploring points of interest. Yeah, they thought that was interesting. But when you do research like this with people who have never done virtual reality before, it's quite difficult to really to ask them, would you like to do that? You get into the trap of, would you want to do that? Because there's no past experience to kind of use. So they thought it was interesting, but it didn't come up as strongly as some of the other things. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So I want to talk a little bit about the characters. I'm doing okay on time. This is quite exciting, I think. The technology has advanced so much. There's no video sound on this. These are 3D models, and we've all seen this. The stunning kind of abilities of Midjourney and Dolly, but the nuances in the animations, I think, are increasingly sophisticated. When you pair this though with VR, the headsets don't have the power to deliver this yet. So we're going to have to get there. Now, this one I want to show you, though. This is an example from a company called Hippocratic.ai. And you can see here that they offer, it's almost like a recruitment agency. You pick your AI, and they all have an AI badge on them. They're not trying to be otherwise. The one thing I find a bit creepy, though, if you notice at the bottom, it says, what the estimated cost? They don't, charge a subscription fee for using these avatars. They do it on a per person basis. And it feels like they're saying, haha, replace your staff. And so this is the danger area, I think. This concerns me. But the execution, now we're just going to take a look. If I can do this successfully. I think this is quite interesting, and I wanted to play a bit of it. I think that's quite interesting, the way she had the details from yesterday, and she could have it in a valuable conversation, it seemed. They have data, their own data, mind you, that says that actually the patients do appreciate the AI, and in some cases think it's better because they don't feel that we've heard this a lot, they're a bother. There's no burden. It's a robot. I can just ask whatever, can't I? I think that's significant. I think that interestingly, let's go back to the deck and we'll see, they are being very careful to find light touch. Maybe these are light touch roles. This is chronic heart failure discharge. So this is something that, I think is an appropriate place for an AI. I would like to feel, though, that there was the care team that the patient was aware of, and that Keisha or Diane was an assistant to someone, a person, in that video, they said they were going to check in with the doctor. So maybe that's enough, So I think there's some really interesting and good things about this. I'm worried about the estimated costs being in per hour, but this is something that is happening in America. I do want to touch base on something that we saw a couple of weeks ago. It was in the financial world. And it's interesting from a user experience perspective because it has a persona of an older sister. This is finance for young people, trying to keep you on track so you don't get into debt. And so they thought the best role for the AI would be as the older sister who gives you a roasting, they call it. And so she shifts from, just kind of being helpful into this mode of giving you a hard time about that spending, and I thought it was interesting that the UX people were talking about getting in and out of that mode was quite tricky. And I thought, wow, I haven't attempted to get anywhere near planning any kind of experience like that, but I thought it was really interesting, that this persona would have different modes and, yeah, I just wanted to share that with you. So the way we've put this together, I know we've only got a few more minutes, so but that's okay because we're nearly there. We designed our character with something off the shelf that I thought, let's just try this one. It tested very well, but it did give us a sense that we could go a little bit more realistic. It was a bit cartoony, so I'd like to try one that is a bit more more capable and a little bit more natural. We're using a platform called Convey. Some of them are more like decision trees, but Convey allowed us to hit the ground running with our prototype. But we are now needing to develop the brain, as I was saying. The Convey one allowed us to have a backstory. So she knew a bit about Holly Blue, but she started making up things about what you could do in the application. So clearly I needed more control on what she was saying. She has a bit of personality, as you know, in ChatGPT. You can give it that anyway. Dialogue style, voice is a bit of a problem. especially if you want free ones. So, and if you want a British accent, it's very difficult to find those sort of combination things. And then the relationship stability, like how quickly might she choose or change into a different emotional tone. I just wanted to touch very briefly on this Turing point there, because this was significant. This is a quote from the research. When she arrived, I thought, wow, hi, darling, which was kind of interesting to me. But then I felt an emotional dip as I realized that she wasn't real. And a number of the respondents said things like this, like there was like, oh, they were going with it. And then, oh, but am I just sad talking to someone who isn't real? And so there was kind of a, I don't know, a pulling back. They were like open and then pulling back. And so I didn't get a sense of an uncanny valley. And I think that's quite important. I think you need to know it's an AI, and AIs can get increasingly realistic looking, but still be clearly AIs, and then we'll be okay. Some of the audio AI things that I've been seeing in healthcare are really too human. And I feel that's not where we want to go. I think you need to know, like that shield, that you're talking to an AI. Yeah, I think that's enough. So here, I just want to show you where we are now with Aria. So you can see we're pushing the boundaries. We need to find a way to optimize her a bit more though, because these are quite easy to make meta-humans, but quite hard to get them optimized. Okay, so let's just talk briefly about LLMs and the idea of these autonomous agents. And I wanted to talk about the security safety issues. So we started with high control, and there's an app being produced here in Cambridge called CAM AI, and where they've wound up, they want to use AI, mental health. This is going to be certified, all the proper stuff. I'm not sure if they're doing clinical trials, but that's the approach that they've taken. They call it responsible AI. So, but to them, responsible AI means they cannot use GPT. What they will do is use machine learning to identify the intent and to map to a set of pre-approved responses. So there will not be the conversational naturalness that we see with GPT, which we've been testing with our prototype. However, I don't think it's going to be that big an issue. You and I were talking about Eliza yesterday. Eliza was really basic. And so if that pool of approved responses is big enough, I think the feeling could be quite natural, and it could work. And so that's an opportunity in healthcare. And certainly in America, the example I gave you of the financial tool, they've already got that out there, but we won't have that for a while due to our regulatory environment here. So this is an option. So you can do this. I also had the thought that you could do it on the way back. So Aria could say something, then on the way back, you could map that to a response. So you could do it that way as well. Now, this is where things get very complex. This happened last year. This was a paper that came out and taught us this, and that's really spanned like a whole bunch of research. The key observation of this study was that large language models encode a wide range of human behavior, not just language, represented in their training data. So if prompted with a narrowly defined context, the models can be used to generate believable behavior. And we're going to see that in action, because a couple of people I was speaking to thought that might be useful to see. But this is not trivial. This means that the LLM can decide what to do, and they can have agency, they can be proactive, and they can direct other agents, as we'll see. So the way the AutoGen framework works, which is the one I'm playing with and I'm going to show you an example of, you have an agent, a GPT-4, it has to be that because GPT-4 has the best reasoning capabilities. It breaks down goals into plans for each AI agent on the team. The assistant is another role, captures and evaluates the team's running experiences. The specialized agents write code and execute searches. and then the orchestrator determines what the team should say and do next. Here's a little bit of the architecture here and how they might work together. And then I'm going to show you just quickly what it looks like. Okay, so here I'm running a program, the AutoGen program, and we're giving it a task. This is from the Gaia data set, which is a set of tasks that are difficult for LLMs. Easy for humans. Humans score over 95% on these tasks, but LLMs often get them wrong. I think the benchmark is about 15%. So here we go. On June 6, 2023, an article by Carolyn Collins Peterson was published in Universe Today. This article mentions a team that produced a paper about their observations, linked at the bottom of the article. Find this paper. Under what NASA award number was the work performed by R.G. Arendt supported by? So there's a lot of things there, isn't there? But we could do it. We would just perform a few searches. So let's see. That goes in to the team. So we've got our orchestrator. The orchestrator has a thought. And this framework has been provided, the headings to the orchestrator, but the orchestrator is filling it in by its own knowledge. So it says here, we're working to address the following user request. I love the way this is like human behavior. You know, you can imagine the team leader going, okay, we're doing this. Here's our task. To answer this request, we've assembled the following team: our assistant, our web surfer, the facts that we know. So this GPT-4 fills that in. These are the things we know: facts to look up, facts to derive. So you can imagine this then becomes the prompt that's going to go. Where's that prompt going to go? Well, in this case, they have an evaluation step first. So we've done our plan, got our facts, and then is the request satisfied? This is self-reflection now. These are the kind of things that help with hallucinations. It takes a look. Okay, has it been addressed? Have we found the article? No, we haven't. Okay, we're just starting. Who's going to go next? That we're going to ask the web surfer to do the search. What needs to happen? What's the instruction? So we send it to the web surfer. The web surfer does its Bing, is a Bing search here. Here are my results. I've found this. Okay, the orchestrator is thinking then, okay, we found the article, but we haven't found the paper or found the NASA award number. Okay, so what are we going to do next? Okay, the next person who needs to do something is the web surfer. They need to find the article. So please open. So they create the command to the web surfer. I think you're getting the idea here how the orchestrator is able to direct the solving of the task, needs to break it down into who's going to do what. And then at each step, it comes back. And you can set this to human intervention. At the moment, it's never, because it's supposed to be autonomous. You give it a task and you wait and you get the response. And in some cases, it's installing Python code. It's writing Python code for itself to do calculations. It goes and does it and comes back. If you set it to human intervention at each step, you will then get the, okay, yeah, do you want me to install this Python library to do this calculation? Yes, okay. And at that point, you can change it if you want to as well. You could say, no, don't use that library. We in this organization use this library, use that. And they go, okay, sure. And so on. So I don't think we need to go through the whole thing, but the idea that GPT can plan and knows how to direct behavior is the cool thing here. So it's not just conversation, and it can do stuff, and it does it pretty well. So that's the insight there, and that's why we're going to be able to build a brain. Now, I know it's time, Giles. I'm just going to take, 2 more minutes. I talked to you about history. This one is an easy one for anyone who's been building digital applications, in the sense that we're just going to need to pass in information from the user state, database of what's happened, in past sessions. So I'm not going to really do that. But I do want to talk a little bit about RAG. Because RAG, you will have heard about, perhaps. This is retrieval augmented generation. And so what researchers are trying to do now is to let the LLM do the planning and the reasoning stuff and the conversation, but the facts need to come from reliable sources, and we need to be able to control which sources. And so I was playing with something called Colbert, which is a retrieval model. So the LLM will say, go find this information. And then the retriever model, instead of scraping web pages, as you may have seen in that example that I've just given, it will find passages related to the query. So it's all nice and tight, and it's not bringing in navigation and all that and costing a lot of money on tokens. But that's the job of the retriever model, to only search the sources that you want it to search. So that be that your own enterprise sources, or that Colbert is interesting because it's got Wikipedia and it's got a couple of other sources of general knowledge. So if I'm thinking now if I can manage the latency, because I need a conversation. If a user asks a question, I need to give an answer pretty soon. If I can manage that, then I will use that for facts. So, and the AI will then say, I'm going to check Wikipedia for you. And so that everyone will know that the facts that the LLM is providing have come from Wikipedia. And I think that will be okay, because we know what's in Wikipedia, but I think that responsible AI design, if you will. So I'm done now, but yeah, just rely on your research toolbox. You got all the tools. You got more tools than the people who do this kind of 3D design and game design generally have. So you're fine there. New tools for immersive experience design. I do think playing around in the 3D space is useful, and there are ways to do that without having to learn game engines. Unity is another one that a lot of people use, but if you can dip a toe in the water, it's rewarding. Think about your character, what you need, capable agents that know and do things. So, well, how do they know what they know, and how do they do what they do? Have you got checks in there for making sure that you're evaluating before it goes to the user, et cetera, the responsible bit? And then the regulatory issues and ethics along the way. I follow Sharon Valor. I think her book's coming out in June, and I'm really looking forward to that, because it will really, it will set, I think, an agenda for how to use AI, particularly in care, but it's a more broad topic area. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There's been a lot of detail that we've gone into here. There was one thing that came to mind. You were talking about being in a virtual world.
Yeah.
And what can you do with regards to movement? I don't know if you or anybody else in the audience have heard of the hollow tile. It's what the Imagineers at Disney have created.
Oh, yeah.
Hands up if you've heard of this.
Yes.
So it's a few people. This is really groundbreaking technology. I highly encourage you to try and find online the video of the hollow tile. But basically allows someone to be just in one spot and just walk on the spot. But with multiple hollow tiles connected, multiple people can be walking on the spot in different directions with a headset on. So in Disneyland, I think there's loads of possibilities. I think another thing that comes to mind would be the silent discos, when you got your headphones on and you're just dancing away. You could be in a virtual world as well. But yeah, yes, you can. But also the hollow tiles can be programmed to move you. So that's another thing that comes to mind with games, is it forcing you to move, whether it's horror or I don't know. We'll see. The possibilities are kind of endless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, let's get one question, because I don't want us to be too far behind. But there's opportunity here to ask if you got any questions. But we'll also take a short break, because there wasn't a break put into the schedule, but I think everybody would like a little break right now. I think it would be appropriate. But any questions? Yeah, sure. Introduce yourself as well, please.
Good morning. My name is Howie. I'm from Roche. I'm a UX lead. I'm a huge gamer, so hearing your presentation was just really quite interesting. Question: when we were testing with the seniors, adults, what device were you testing on?
That was a Quest 2, wasn't it, Jay? Yeah, I didn't have the 3 yet.
Right.
Yeah.
And is the goal that you're going to continue developing in this sort of this sort of accessory, I should say. Or
It's gotta be, because the Apple is way too expensive. It's too far away. We're a few years away from there being light ones, but the standalone thing is an accessibility issue as well. PC VR is so difficult. Do you do PC VR?
I have a Quest 2.
Oh, okay.
I tried it with the link cable so that I can get more sort of graphic power kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you in your comment in terms of like being detached from the PC. The experience is just not as engaging. Well, at least for me. From the realism perspective.
It's really
but I
amazing.
think maybe when devices get more powerful,
then they will, absolutely. That's got to be. I mean, that was the big change, even for me. And I'm a gamer and a techie, but you need a GPU, really. But I got in because it was standalone. I got it, and oh my God, I've got to now get a GPU is what I thought. Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind based on, because I'm also a gamer, I actually really love playing computer games. I don't have the time for it these days.
Yeah.
But and also that mention of Disney is that Disney, and even in my own storytelling from my talk yesterday, realism isn't required for you to have immersion.
No.
It's that consistency of an art style that is visually appealing.
It's kind of like Minecraft, don't you think? Yeah,
because I find Minecraft to not be engaging personally. I think it's a bit too basic for me. But I think of virtual worlds that have been done for all kinds of headsets. I'm more on the PlayStation VR headset person myself. And there's the Astrobot. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Astrobot on the PlayStation. Yeah. If you haven't actually played that, I highly encourage you to find the means to. It is still ultimately a game, but particularly when you're playing it for the PS5 and the new Astrobot game that they've got for that, it's just so immersive, even though it is still ultimately a game.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the fact that with the PS5, where it's not the headset now, it's still just what you see on the screen, you feel the footsteps as the character's moving. You can feel the rain as the character's walking into rain. And it's these little things that draw in immersion. So I think the realism is helpful, but in context is what are the techniques that are encouraging you to respond appropriately to the stimuli.
Yeah.
And that can engage folks. Even, it doesn't really matter if they've got dementia or not, because we can all relate to walking in the rain at some point in our life.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah,
But,
that's a moment like my Holly Blue looking out over the sea.
Yes.
I think that's another moment, one of those emotional moments, isn't it?
And the other thing that comes to mind, if anybody's had any of those 4D experiences where there's like mist that's sprayed, or the seat starts rumbling, ways for that to be introduced as well. But thank you so much for the talk. Always a pleasure.